Hello, and welcome to The Sleepy Owl, a cozy nook where you can gently unwind and drift into a peaceful night's rest. Tonight, we're sharing another soothing story, one that can help settle your mind and foster a feeling of quiet calm. But first, let's take a moment to prepare our bodies and minds for a tranquil, rejuvenating sleep. Settle in comfortably, and with each slow inhale and gentle exhale, allow the day's worries to gradually fade away. It can be challenging to pull away from the day's busyness, particularly as bedtime approaches. Yet remember, the less we stress over falling asleep quickly, the easier it becomes for our minds to release any tension. Let the gentle rhythm of your breath carry off lingering concerns, and let tonight's story be your guide toward deep relaxation. Now make yourself comfortable and let the warmth of the sleepy owl envelop you. Enjoy the story, and may you find a restful, peaceful slumber here in our little nighttime sanctuary. In the wild and wintry North Country, there lived a woodcutter, a kind widower with a lovely daughter named Daria. She brought joy to his life, but eventually he desired to remarry. Understanding his wish, Daria welcomed her new stepmother and stepsister Maria, hoping for companionship. However, harmony in their forest home was short-lived. The critical stepmother, envious of Daria's charms overshadowing Maria's, grew resentful. Despite Daria's efforts to please, she faced constant scolding. Fortunately, Daria had a loyal friend in Victor, a large dog her father had given her. Victor, though wolf-like in appearance, was gentle and devoted to Daria. When Daria's father embarked on a journey to trade wood for supplies, she bid him farewell with Victor by her side, dreading the days ahead without him. As her father rode off, her stepmother and stepsister vanished, indifferent to his departure. The day unfolded in its usual manner, with each person tending to their own tasks and exchanging few words. However, Daria's stepmother was quietly scheming to exploit her husband's absence, devising a plan to finally rid herself of Daria. In the late afternoon, as the early winter sunset approached, Daria was engrossed in reading in her sleeping loft. The tranquility was disrupted by a commotion downstairs in the kitchen. Her stepmother was making a fuss about something, prompting Daria to quickly descend to investigate. The front door stood wide open, allowing the chill of the air to permeate the house, while her stepmother appeared distressed, wringing her hands. "Daria," she exclaimed, "the wind blew the door open, and Victor, your dog, ran off." Surveying the scene, Daria noticed Victor was missing. Typically found basking in the stove's warmth, he was neither upstairs nor in the kitchen. Recognizing this, Daria wordlessly grabbed her woolen wrap and dashed outside, calling out for Victor. She scoured their small homestead, checking every possible hiding spot, but Victor was nowhere to be found. Returning to the front door, she inquired of her stepmother if she had seen which way he had gone. Deviously, her stepmother gestured towards the trail leading deep into the woods, suggesting, "Hurry, you might catch him." Without pausing to don warmer attire, Daria sprinted towards the path, her mind solely focused on locating Victor and bringing him back to the safety of their home. As she disappeared into the dimness, her stepmother shut the door, exchanging a sly grin with Maria. Opening the pantry, they discovered Victor nonchalantly seated inside, finishing a stack of pancakes, oblivious to Daria's calls. Amused by their successful ruse, Maria and her mother chuckled as Victor, realizing Daria was absent, sniffed at the front door. They settled down to enjoy the remaining pancakes from the oven. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, Daria's search for Victor continued. Unaware of the encroaching twilight, she pressed on, failing to consider that Victor, a resilient northern dog, could likely find his own way home, and that it might be wiser to postpone her search until morning. She might have, at the very least, acquired a heavier coat. However, who could have blamed her for her urgent desire to locate her best friend? She reassured herself that if she just turned around the next bend, if she just called out a bit louder, her dog would come bounding towards her. In this manner, she strayed too far. By the time she acknowledged she was lost and far from home, night had descended. Soon, Daria was plodding aimlessly through the twilight, over tree roots, around boulders, and under low-hanging branches, calling out for Victor. Yet deep down, she suspected her dog was nowhere close. As the forest grew darker and darker, she realized that the wisest course of action would be to locate some form of shelter and wait there until dawn. She stumbled upon a small clearing surrounded by densely packed evergreen trees. Slipping under the protection of their drooping branches, she wrapped her shawl tighter around herself. Her chosen resting place offered some defense against the chill wind, and she could discern the moonlight casting a glow over the surroundings. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to suffice, she reasoned. Leaning against a tree trunk, she began to drift off. Unexpectedly, something peculiar occurred. The air around her swiftly cooled, rousing her from her chilled daze. Her nose tingled, and the forest seemed to murmur in her ear. Turning to glance behind her, she sensed a presence. Or perhaps it was simply a shift in the atmosphere. When she faced the clearing once more, she could scarcely trust her eyes. Standing a short distance away, she beheld a tall figure. Initially unable to discern the individual's identity, he was gesturing his arm left and right in an arc. As he did so, the air around him seemed to glisten. These tiny, shimmering particles drifted from his fingertips on the breeze. Upon touching the branches and the ground, wherever they landed, a new hue emerged. Green boughs and green grass transformed into pristine white. It was as though he were an artist, reimagining the forest and renewing it. Mesmerized, she observed as he seemed to notice her presence for the first time. Halting his enigmatic actions, he regarded her with evident surprise. Daria was at a loss for words. In fact, she was utterly speechless. Thus, it was he who broke the silence. "Goodness, where did you come from?" he inquired in an amiable tone. Yet Daria found herself unable to respond. She realized he was rather handsome. Observing her lack of reply, he crossed his arms and scrutinized her, contemplating the answer himself. Then, with a shake of his head, as if reaching a realization, "Well, miss," he said, "you can't stay here. I'm about to layer this entire forest in a deep winter freeze, and you will not find it comfortable for sleeping." Daria finally found her words and reassured him that she didn't want to interrupt. After all, being lost in the forest again was worse than just being cold. She didn't want to have to start wandering the woods again in the dark. The man shook his head skeptically, brushing some stray ice off his trouser leg. Regarding her for a moment, he shrugged. "All right, then. I'll get on with it," he said. Then, rather apologetically, he added, "I really have so very much to do tonight, you see." Daria nodded vigorously and pulled her shawl around herself again, tucking her feet further under her skirt. Putting on a brave face, she said, "Good luck. I'll just go back to sleep." The man retreated to a spot deeper in the clearing, looking back over his shoulder at her once or twice, as if hesitating. Then he began spreading his arms wide again, and a spectacular, glittering spray of winter resumed. In the light of the moon, it was like diamonds coated the forest floor and every other surface near him. Oh, but the temperature did drop. Daria was determined to keep her courage up, but it was very, very cold now. Her chin began to wobble as she shivered, and then her teeth made a little chatter. The tall, handsome stranger turned mid-clearing and looked at her, and then he abruptly stopped his work once again. Striding back in her direction, he spoke to Daria a second time. "Miss, you are clearly not dressed for winter, and I fear that this isn't even the coldest it's going to get this evening. Perhaps you could travel homeward to a fire somewhere." Daria's face fell, and she nodded her head, reluctantly explaining that she had gone off course while seeking her dog, and she actually had no idea how to get home. Hearing this, the man's face softened with a friendly expression. He bowed low and introduced himself. "I am King Frost. I have dominion over the north, and I sometimes even bring our climate to those in the south." Then he winked mischievously and added, "People take me for granted up here, but those folks in the warmer climates find me awfully impressive." The girl smiled and responded with a curtsy, introducing herself. But even as Daria put on her best manners, the Frost King could see she was looking numb and weak, and he realized he would have to help her if she were to survive the night in his wintry forest. Motioning that she should follow him, he said, "My sleigh is nearby, and there are warm blankets and refreshments there that will revive you. Come, let me show you the way." Grateful for his offer, Daria trailed a few steps behind him as he crossed the clearing. Her leather shoes sank into the powdery snow, and she marveled at how the entire area had been grassy just a short time before. However, her attention shifted when she spotted a shining white sleigh tucked beneath the tall trees. The sleigh was hitched to a snow-white horse, and its silver runners sparkled in the moonlight, appearing so beautiful that it seemed unreal. The Frost King swung open the door to the sleigh and bowed gallantly, gesturing for her to step inside. Daria approached cautiously, expressing her gratitude before settling onto a luxurious red velvet seat adorned with soft woolen blankets. She eagerly wrapped herself up, trying to warm her face and hands. Looking up, she saw the Frost King snap his fingers, conjuring a silver tray holding a steaming mug of mailed cider out of thin air. Uttering a small cry of delight, she accepted the mug from him, and he smiled broadly. He closed the door to the sleigh and leaned on it, as if prepared for a conversation. Furrowing his handsome brow with a look of concentration, he inquired about how she had ended up lost deep in the forest on her own. Sipping the delicious cider, Daria proceeded to recount the story of her faithful dog, Victor, slipping out of their cottage and disappearing into the forest. The Frost King listened attentively and then asked her to describe her house, whether it was large or small, built of stone or wood, and if it had a garden with a fence or a chicken house. Daria described their cozy wooden house with a steeply pitched roof, waving her hands delicately as she spoke of the richly carved detailing around the windows crafted by her father. She detailed the yard, which included a kitchen garden, a hay shed, and a small barn, all surrounded by a rustic, woven wood fence. As she painted the picture in his mind, he couldn't help but smile, appreciating her love for her home and knowing exactly where it was located. He conjured a pretty wrapped box from behind his back and presented it to her with a wink. "I have two pieces of good news," he said. "The first is that these will be the most delicious chocolates you've ever tasted." Blushing, Daria accepted the box and removed the lid, marveling at the delicate treats inside. The Frost King continued, "The second piece of good news is that I know where your house is, and I will take you home." Overjoyed, Daria clapped her hands, dropping the box into her lap. She thanked him profusely and then politely offered him a piece of the chocolate. He accepted it, savoring it briefly before seating himself in the sleigh beside her. Daria had anticipated the Frost King to feel cold when touched, but he exuded an indefinable warmth. He managed to be both dazzling and reassuring. As he encouraged the horse to move forward and the sleigh smoothly started moving, she stole a glance at him from the side. Until that evening, she had always viewed winter as a harsh and desolate season. However, encountering the Frost King had completely altered her perspective. Settling deeper into her plush seat, relishing the sensation of the swiftly moving sleigh, she was acutely conscious of his presence. Her emotions were not chilly, they were joyful and comforting. She couldn't determine how much time had passed, as the sleigh ride felt like a voyage through a fantastical dreamland. The trees appeared to graciously raise their branches as the Frost King passed by, and the forest resonated with the soft melody of countless tinkling bells. The snow and ice he had fashioned resembled glistening ornaments, generously adorning every corner of the landscape with magic. Nothing was more complimentary than the radiant moonlight, casting a glow over everything. The Frost King proved to be an ideal companion for the journey. He sang cheerful tunes, regaled her with delightful tales of his escapades, and politely inquired about her life as a woodcutter's daughter. She felt her responses were rather mundane compared to his extraordinary adventures, but she shared what she could. She recounted stories of her father, stepmother, and stepsister, and their life together at the homestead. These details seemed ordinary to her, yet she didn't want him to cease conversing with her. The Frost King found her sincerity endearing and thoroughly enjoyed her narratives. Above all, he admired her affection for the simple life in the challenging northern region where he ruled. Eventually, the rhythmic sound of the sleigh gliding through the wintry forest faded as they arrived at her home's yard. Daria felt a pang of regret. Starting out so apprehensively, this night had turned into the most extraordinary night of her life. Stepping out of the sleigh, the Frost King opened the door widely and extended his hand to her. "Be careful, watch your step," he advised with a grin. "Someone has blanketed your entire garden with ice and snow." Daria chuckled softly and began to remove the exquisite woolen blanket from her shoulders. "No, no, keep it," he insisted. "Consider it a gift from me to you." She blushed and nodded, to which he added, "It might come in handy next time you venture into the woods at night." Upon opening her front door, Daria was delighted to find Victor sitting there, enthusiastically wagging his tail. She realized he must have returned home while she was away, a thought that crossed her mind as she buried her face in his soft fur and embraced him tightly. As she rose and gently shut the door, she stole a glance through the crack, catching a final glimpse of the Frost King commanding the majestic horse to carry him away. Watching him depart from the yard, she could have sworn he winked at her once more. Daria's stepmother and stepsister put on a grand display of welcoming her back, pretending they had been worried all night. Privately, the stepmother was quite displeased that Daria had made her way back, and with such an extraordinary tale to tell. She would have dismissed it as a fever dream, if not for the exquisite blanket now in the girl's possession, its fine craftsmanship suggesting a hefty price tag. Later that evening, the woodcutter returned and listened to his daughter's account with a hint of doubt. Nonetheless, his predominant feeling was one of relief. The news of Daria's forest misadventures troubled him greatly, and he found it astonishing that Victor would dash off into the woods in such a manner. Fixing a stern gaze on the dog, he warned him not to cause his mistress any more worry, and added that Victor should cease his pancake begging by the stove. Sitting expectantly by the oven, Victor tilted his head and appeared remorseful. Life resumed its usual course, and winter settled in as expected. Yet Daria sensed a change within herself. She experienced bouts of daydreaming and entertained thoughts unlike any she had before. Prior to her forest escapade, she had never envisioned a life beyond the simple cottage existence she currently led. However, her encounter with the Frost King had broadened her horizons to wonders she had never fathomed. At night, she dreamed of his warm smile and pondered the fascinating places he might be exploring. She wondered about the marvels unfolding at his majestic command. Several weeks after their encounter, Daria opened the front door one morning following a heavy snowstorm the night before. To her surprise, a beautifully wrapped box sat on the doorstep, adorned with shimmering silver paper and a soft green velvet bow. Bringing the package inside, she carefully unwrapped it, mindful not to damage the exquisite paper. Upon lifting the lid, she discovered a magnificent velvet cloak inside. Adorned in royal blue with delicate silver snowflake embroidery, the cloak captivated her stepsister and stepmother, who couldn't resist touching the luxurious fabric. Draping the cloak around herself, Daria leaned in to feel its softness against her cheek, then hugged it close, overwhelmed with joy. She was aware that the cloak was a gift from the Frost King. The cloak itself was delightful, but it was his thoughts of her that brought her the most joy. The arrival of this extravagant gift greatly displeased her stepmother. She ordered Daria to put away the silly cape and focus on her chores. Additionally, she demanded that the girl clear the entire front walkway of snow, which was a particularly malicious request, given the cold weather and lack of urgency. Despite this, Daria's positive attitude remained unscathed. She donned her old coat and completed her tasks almost as if in a trance. The Frost King had re-entered her life. Throughout the ongoing winter, days and nights passed uneventfully, as the northern winter was bleak, with no nearby neighbors to visit or entertain the woodcutter and his family. Despite this, he was content with his home and work, while Daria sustained herself with hopeful thoughts of possibly encountering the Frost King again someday. Meanwhile, her stepsister and stepmother's envy and discontent continued to grow. The situation escalated after the following heavy snowfall when another unexpected gift arrived for Daria. Opening the door at dawn, with snowdrifts surrounding the cottage, she discovered a second gift wrapped in shiny gold paper with a white ribbon. Bringing the exquisite gift inside, Daria carefully unwrapped it in front of her family once more. While her father observed from his seat by the stove, her stepsister and stepmother eagerly leaned in to see the contents. Inside the box were the softest, most finely crafted boots any of them had ever seen. Elaborately embroidered in a colorful design, the boots featured a warm wool lining. Daria removed a sock and slipped her foot into one of the beautiful boots, reveling in its softness. They seemed tailor-made for her, fitting perfectly. Lost in her joy, she failed to notice her stepmother's annoyance. However, a moment later, the woman could no longer contain herself. "Well," she remarked, "Maria, my daughter, you must venture into the forest. Discover what splendid gifts your stepsister receives from this King Frost she has encountered. Allow him to rescue you as well, and you will receive many more exquisite and costly items." Maria stared at her mother in disbelief. Surely she did not intend to send her out into the cold on such a futile mission, Maria thought. Yet her scheming mother was resolute. She instructed the woodcutter to escort Maria into the woods without a coat and abandon her there. Daria and her father attempted to dissuade the stepmother from her scheme, but she remained unmoved. Later that afternoon, he reluctantly packed his stepdaughter into his sled and took her out into the forest, not even knowing exactly where the girl should be deposited. Upon leaving her, he gave her his coat, telling her he wouldn't leave her there long and that she should take care until morning. Maria rejected his offering, saying that his coat smelled like a horse and that she would soon be showered with gifts from the Frost King anyway. Unable to change her mind, the sorrowful man shook his head and returned home. Meanwhile, Maria stood in a clearing in the forest, stamping her feet and clapping her hands together, impatient to encounter the Frost King. She affected her most helpless voice and called out for assistance. Alas, no majestic wintry figure appeared, and all she succeeded in doing was scaring away any wildlife that may have been lingering nearby. As darkness fell, the girl became very ill-tempered. Where was her rescuer, with his lavish gifts and his warm drinks? Why had he not appeared to her just as he had to her sister? No amount of making a fuss seemed to conjure him, and she soon began weeping in self-pity as she huddled under the shelter of a pine bough. She was just about to start walking homeward when she heard the sound of harness bells approaching. Sure enough, an elegant white sleigh appeared, pulled by a massive white horse, and seated in the conveyance was none other than the Frost King. She was sure of it. She had never seen such a dazzlingly handsome man before. He was everything Daria had described him to be, and then some. Not wanting to be overlooked, Maria ran out into the path of his sleigh, ready to play the damsel in distress. He stopped the horse and looked at her quizzically. "What are you doing out here in the depths of winter by yourself, miss?" he asked her, raising an eyebrow. Simpering in a way that she imagined to be attractive, she danced from one foot to the other. explaining that she had become lost and that she was awfully cold. Could he not offer her assistance? The Frost King pondered her question for a moment and looked at the skies, as if considering her request. "I have a lot of work to do in the woods tonight, you see," he explained, "but you may ride along with me for a bit, and when I'm finished, I will see that you are returned home." Unconcerned that she might be interrupting his tasks, she immediately pulled on the door of his sleigh, indicating she would like to get in. With a wave of his hand, he made it fly open, but he appeared to do it with slight regret. Although she was disappointed not to be regally handed in like a fine lady, she took her chance to climb aboard. She gently wrapped herself in the fine blanket that sat there, secretly assuming it would be going home with her. After all, this was where Daria's fine woolen wrap had come from. As they began their journey, Maria cleared her throat with an air of importance. The Frost King halted the horse and turned to her with a patient expression. Inquiring what was wrong, she asked in a sugary tone, "Will you not offer me some refreshment?" A look of comprehension dawned on the wintry king's face, as if he had just grasped the truth about her. Then, mischievously, he produced a simple cup of hot water and a slice of bread. Handing them to her on a plate, he instructed her to enjoy the meal. Maria was quite displeased. This was not the treatment she had anticipated. Had she ventured into the freezing woods to be treated like an ordinary person? No, she thought irritably, she had not. As the sleigh resumed its journey, she cleared her throat once more. "How long will your work continue?" she asked in a petulant tone. "I am feeling quite cold and wish to be taken back home." The Frost King didn't even glance at her. Instead, he responded, "Indeed, young miss, I have just realized that returning you home is my top priority, as I believe we will not enjoy each other's company for the rest of the night." Then, with a touch of irony, he added, "I think I know the way to your house." Maria was taken aback by his indifferent response, feeling greatly disappointed. As he swiftly turned the sleigh and sped towards the cottage, she slouched under the blanket in a sullen mood. Her mother would not be pleased when she returned home empty-handed. The Frost King courteously dropped Maria off at the cottage, but without any formalities, and vanished from the yard before she could even open the door. Upon entering the house, only her stepfather and Daria appeared relieved to see her. Maria's mother was rather let down that her encounter with the Frost King had been brief. Her disappointment deepened upon noticing that Maria had brought back no gifts. Even the blanket she had used in the sleigh had disappeared with him. Meanwhile, Daria felt a sense of relief. She was glad that Maria had returned safely from the wintry woods, but secretly pleased that the Frost King had not favored her sister equally. Daria cherished the memories of their conversations and the gifts he had left her. She refused to believe that he bestowed such offerings on every young lady lost in the forest. Life at the homestead resumed its usual winter routine. No more major storms occurred and spring seemed imminent. Although the season of renewal was typically a time for joy at the homestead, Daria felt differently this year. She knew that with winter's departure, there would be no more visits from the Frost King. This realization left her feeling strangely desolate. Daria, however, was in for a surprise. Following weeks of rising temperatures, April brought an unexpected twist. One morning, the family awoke to a heavy snowfall that blanketed everything in the yard. Frost covered the windows, and the sunlight glistened on the landscape. Curious for another surprise, Daria opened the front door to find a wrapped box resting on the snow on the front step. The box was wrapped in soft purple fabric and adorned with a silver ribbon. To her delight, she noticed the Frost King standing at a distance, grinning widely with his sleigh waiting under the trees. He looked even more handsome than she remembered, his entire body shimmering in the late winter sun in a godlike manner. Breaking the momentary spell, he gestured towards the box and cheerfully said, "Open it." Standing in the doorway, Daria untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, letting out a cry of joy. Inside was a magnificent diamond tiara. She had never seen a diamond before, let alone a crown of such grandeur, and she could only cover her mouth in amazement. Glancing up at the Frost King, she shook her head in disbelief, expressing her hesitation to accept such an extravagant gift. After all, what could a woodcutter's daughter do with a diamond crown? The Frost King approached her, walking through the snow to her door. Somberly, he revealed that he had fallen for a lovely girl he had met in the forest, and no longer wished to rule over the winter alone. With a slight bow and his hand over his heart, he asked Daria to be his wife and the cherished queen of snow and ice. For a moment, she stared in disbelief at the delicate tiara, shining and sparkling in the sunlight. However, Daria knew she would agree. It was clear that this was her destiny, and she was filled with happiness, as the Frost King was her perfect match in every way. Daria and the king exchanged vows in a modest, dignified ceremony at his ice palace in the perpetual winter region. Naturally, Victor joined them and was the happiest dog imaginable. Not only did the royal pet enjoy pancakes at every meal, but he felt right at home in the wintry palace, thanks to his thick fur coat. Despite being a woman accustomed to summer, the Queen of Snow and Ice occasionally ventured to warmer regions, bringing a refreshing gust of cool air. So the next time you savor that early autumn chill or revel in a cold summer rainstorm, know that she is nearby, and remember that she and the Frost King will reunite when the time is right, bringing back the enchantment of a winter wonderland.